You're listening to a Comics XF podcast.
X-Men. Get it!
Hey everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of Battle of the Atom. This is your weekly X-Men podcast where we rank every story from A to Z.
I'm Adam.
And wouldn't you know it, I'm Marvel's most special boy, Zach.
You really are, Zach.
Did you know, Adam, this sounds like an urban legend, but it's true.
That you were accosted by the
accosted? No, hold on. Let me do my urban legend, Adam. The urban legend is so important.
Okay.
The legend goes, if you're walking around Hell's Kitchen, dark of night, where Daredevil lives, and you happen to see the editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics and yell out something just kind of because you're annoying and you had a tired day and it was going to make you personally laugh. Not even yell out anything mean, but just yell out, yo, insert name of editor-in-chief here.
Yeah.
Did you know that he will give you a exclusive comic book that they only printed 25 of that has a specially numbered card on the back telling you that you're Marvel's most special boy?
That is wild. Most special boy is a pretty impressive title.
I don't know if that's exactly what it says on the card, but that is the sentiment of the card, is that if you do find an editor in the middle of the night in New York City, you will be called Marvel's most special boy and be given a comic that no one else has except for your four other friends.
Wild that I missed this. Anna and I were back home by the time that this actually happened to you.
Oh, at New York Comic Con, the thing that this episode is ostensibly about.
Yes, because we were at New York Comic Con.
We were.
This past weekend. And I don't know, somehow in this story, I was replaced by some individual named RJ, who I don't know who that is. So
RJ's our friend. He's our new friend we made. We made a friend at New York Comic Con, Adam, and it's great. And we had dinner and it was a good time. And you just were like, I want to go with my girlfriend instead.
Well, it was a lovely weekend. We did get to hang out with a lot of our friends.
Honestly, more friends than I can reasonably count.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like every time we turned to a lane, we were running into somebody else, which was fantastic.
And not just friends that we had an inkling were going to be there, and some that we didn't. But I had a great time running into a handful of Battle of the Atom listeners. And you know what? Everyone was cool.
Yes,
I want to be so clear. Everyone was super cool, and honestly, it was really. I've become a hermit in my old age, as we all know.
Yes, in your old age.
Listen. One of the most important men in the world was my age when he died. Sit down, youth group, because I'd like to tell you about a guy from Nazareth named JC.
Stop.
I'm just saying. Many people were at the end of their life at my age, but no, I become a hermit in my old age. And I'm not saying I want to venture back out into the internet. I want to be so clear about that. However, it was really cool, since I don't get that constant feedback that I used to get in the validation that made me go insane for a little bit. It was really cool to talk to some people and hear from people that I expected and people I didn't, that they liked the show and that they enjoy it, because I don't get the feedback. I get to talk to my friend Adam, who I love to talk to every week, but I don't have that little dopamine hit anymore. And it was truly a joy to hear from folks who enjoyed the show. So thank you so much. I had a great time at New York Comic Con. Adam, did you as well?
I did. I've been going to this show for many years. So it's always a blast when you can just have a nice tight-knit group of friends hanging out and walking around. So if you want to hear thoughts on the con in general, our buddy Dan Grote and I did write a piece for Comics XF that you can check out. You've probably read it by this point if you're a Comics XF reader, but if you missed it, you can go check that out along with some photos that we took. But But Zach, it's always great. You and I have not done a con together since, well, boy, Chicago 2021.
It was 21. It was 21.
21?
It was a Pando con, a late Pando con, but a Pando con.
Yes. So it was just great to have the crew there and had a good time. And we talked to quite a few people.
Yeah, speaking of a crew, we talked to a crew of folks.
We sure did. So on this New York Comic-Con 2024 super special, you are going to hear from, why don't we go back and forth? I'll say a name and you say a name.
Do you want to say a name, and then do you want to say a name and the comic you'll probably know them best from?
Sure. Okay, I'm going to start the list off with art superstar Pepe Larraz, who you might know from the top of our Boda ranking list, the artist of House of X. He's great. Who else we got?
Well, the thing is, we also have writer Kieron Gillen, best known for Beta Ray Bill Godhunter.
Yes, I'm sure that's what he would like to be known for. Zach also spoke with Al Ewing, who you know from X-Men Red and a variety of other second half Krakoa stuff, though he's probably more well known for his other.
And also, I talked to Declan Shalvey, artist, writer extraordinaire, who you might know from Image 30th Anthology #1.
Or the new Mystique book. Zach, you got a chance to talk to Spencer Ackerman.
Got to talk to Spencer Ackerman, who's currently writing Iron Man.
Yep.
Jackson won a Pulitzer Prize.
Hey, I mean, it's not every day you talk to somebody who won a Pulitzer.
I'll be honest, Adam. Between you, me, and the bookshelf over there, we ain't getting a Pulitzer for anything we've ever done.
No, I'm not expecting that. I did talk to co-writer of NYX, Jackson Lanzing. So that was a fun time.
And I got a chance to talk to artist Dave Marquez, who
No,
I didn't.
I did.
Adam, I'm sorry. We were doing the back and forth, and
it's okay.
If we would have thought about this more than like 10 minutes before,
I would have reordered it.
We would have reordered it so much. Dave Marquez, as you all know, is the superstar artist behind Batman / Superman, The Year of the Villain, the Batman Who Laughs #4.
You remember he drew the Wolverine that was way too handsome in the X-Men wedding special?
Dave Marquez drew that. He drew. He's currently drawing Uncanny X-Men. Dave Marquez is a really good artist. Yeah. I truly love Dave Marquez. Adam, who's next? Who did I talk to?
Somebody I talked to last year. Zach got a chance to catch up with Josh Cassara, who has the new Wolverine Deadpool book with Ben Percy.
Adam, I think you might be mistaking his best known work, because I do believe his best known work is the Scrabble scorecard that he drew on, and
it's on your wall.
On my wall. Yeah, I think that's the one. But we do also have Gerry Duggan.
Gerry,
here. Yeah, we got Gerry Duggan. He did. Let's see. Actually, I'm gonna pull this one out because this is one that legit was, I think, the first Gerry Duggan comic I read. Hawkeye versus Deadpool.
Hey,
I don't know if it holds up, but I don't think Hawkeye versus Deadpool was ever like supposed to be the Matt Fraction Hawkeye good, but pretty good.
Fun fact about Gerry Duggan is that Gerry is from our infamous lost episode where his audio didn't record properly. And
okay, hold on. That sounds like Gerry's at fault here. I'm pretty sure that one was on me.
It doesn't matter. It just didn't happen for some reason. Like, it got messed up. Anyway, it's not Gerry's fault. And now over the last 2 years, I've tried to interview Gerry, and both times he has either gotten sick or lost his voice, and we have not been able to do it. So Zach, you finally got him. Good job.
I landed him, and technically, I don't think I've ever landed Gerry Duggan because I think you interviewed him at the C2E2 2020.
Oh yeah, okay.
The last convention.
Yeah, I noticed there's a New Jersey native on this list, Zach.
There is, and by the way, Hawkeye vs. Deadpool was drawn by Matteo Laioli in an early work, so you might want to check that out, Adam. Yeah. New Jersey native, which I didn't know, Chris Condon is on here, who you might know from such works as That Texas Blood or The Ultimate Wolverine, the new one that's coming out.
Yeah.
Chris, if you did a book that has a funny title in the past, I would have loved to say it, but unfortunately, I didn't Google fast enough.
And we also have an interview with the artist of the new title Sentinels, Justin Mason. So quite the roster here. We hope you enjoy this super-sized episode. And Zach, anything else we need to say before we get into these conversations?
No, we've already spent at least 10 minutes wasting people's time before they get to the good parts.
Are you ready?
Yeah, if you are.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, make me easy questions because I'm not I look more clever when I'm shut up. Okay?
I am here with art superstar Pepe Larraz. Pepe, how is your convention going so far?
I like the superstar part, please. Can you say it in every time you make me a question? Please, superstar artist.
Pepe, you are in my spreadsheet as art god. So yeah, that's where we're at. But I wanted to start with something a little weird. When Blood Hunt came out, comic book stores got a pair of vampire teeth and a Pepe Larraz trading card. I was curious, did you have any input on your power rankings here?
Yeah, that's something that my fighting skills are like astonishingly low. But also it's my durability, so I'm very concerned about my future. Surprisingly, my speed is high.
Yeah.
Twice the durability. I mean, my speed is twice my durability. So I guess it's like the Nexus 6 thing. You know, you bright with more light, and you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna.
So you didn't have any input on any?
No. They asked me for the picture, and I was thinking it was something they were doing in the back of the book or something like the creators with one extra page or something. And suddenly it was like this, and it was like, what? It was so nice. I mean, I have it and I show it to my daughter. Like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
And it's nice.
So speaking of Blood Hunt, one of the things that you were doing for this, which is a new format, is these red band versions of the book where you basically have to draw kind of additional pages. How does it work?
Well, actually, it was like there was like 3 ways of doing this. It was like additional pages or pages that we tell in a different way, or just panels or addition to panels, or panels drawn in a different way, more gory stuff or more, hard stuff, not meant for, the younger readers. So it was like these 3 things. Surprisingly, people online, they start thinking it was like we draw like the gore version before and then we cropped it to make, fit for younger readers.
Yeah.
It was the opposite. We did the regular version, and then we turned up the volume and all the blood and all that. And it was fun because when I storyboard the comic, when I make my sketches, I choose the way to tell the story in a very specific way. To tell the story the way I wanted to tell him, and the way I can convey the emotion and the story in the best way. And then having a second chance filled me with a lot of questions, like, okay, how can I do this and keep true to the story, but at the same time, turn up the blood and the horror of the book. It was nice because we have a very good conversation between the editor, Tom Brevoort, and the writer, Jen McKay, and me about terror and what exactly terror was. And at some point, I suggested that we could have Blade feeding the vampires with a baby.
Oh, nice.
And I remember Tom Brevoort say, okay, a line has to be drawn somewhere. And say like, no, but this is horror. I mean, we cannot only focus on guts and blood, and that we have to make something that you really want to take your gaze away from. And they say, yeah, but Marvel has to be comfortable publishing this. And I was okay. So yeah, it was nice. So it's not always that you can push boundaries a bit, with American comics, especially with Disney comic like this. Yeah.
So speaking of pushing boundaries, you have a tendency of trying to, at least from what I can see, push yourself and to keep getting better and better and better. You're often playing with perspective in really interesting ways. I see you playing around with halftone, ink washes. What is it about trying new things that makes it exciting for you to keep trying these new things?
I mean, you can see the people I'm surrounded with. I'm surrounded by. I just try to keep the pace. Now, what can I say? I mean, some of my more admired artists, I call them my friends. So we share a lot. So this is like, I want to try new things all the time because I see art that motivates me and I want to try new things. For me, drawing is like a way of knowledge. That's the way I like to think about it. I need to learn. Always, I'm learning. This is the best part of my work. I'm always learning. I like to try new things because I want to learn how to do those things. In Bloodhound, for example, I was playing with the night effects, the lights, the shadows, all that kind of stuff. Trying to move in a different way that I've done previously to get the horror effect, that kind of expressionist tone. Every book brings you something to learn. So sometimes it takes a bit to understand what you're going to learn with this book. So that's why I'm always trying new things, because sometimes suddenly I discover, okay, this book is about this. I need to learn how to draw this kind of stuff. In Exos War was armies and giant battles. I need to learn how to do this, so I have to develop new things. And I started to treat, the digital drawing like a watercolor or whatever, because it's easier, or because it's natural, or because it goes with the project. Yeah. So I'm always trying to do new things, but mostly it's because we have an amazing community of comic artists, and we know each other, and we are always keeping an eye on each other, and everyone is trying new things. It's like, oh, wow, I'm gonna try this, I'm gonna try that, I'm gonna try. And for me, it's something that if I don't know how to do something like color, I'm trying to get myself into color more and more lately. It's because I don't know how to do it, because it scares me. Yeah. and I need to go there, and I need to learn, and I need to understand. So for me, it's like a constant searching for knowledge.
That's really interesting because you have such a good relationship with Marte Gracia in terms of your work. How is it communicating with him as a collaborator?
It's great. I mean, my relation with Marte started. I was a fan of Marte a lot of time before he knew about me. Okay. He was covering Stuart Immonen and a lot of great artists, and it was, I was enjoying his work a lot. So it was like, I want to work with this guy. And we, actually, when they gave me Extermination, we were able to work together. And that very year, I met him in Mexico, in La Mole. Yeah. And he's not only one of the best colorists out there, has very fresh ideas, very good ideas, like a great concept of the color of the book. He's very into books. It's not a guy that is doing that because he cannot work on animation or whatever. No. He's coloring books because he loves that. But also he's a super nice, kind human being. It was like, I want to be next to this guy as long as I can because I'm having too much fun. We understand each other quite well, I think. And I like to have somebody with this level of skin beside me because it prevents me to step into his turf. So it's like, okay, I do my stuff in the pages and you do your stuff in the pages, and I don't want to be telling you what to do. I just want you to express yourself. I think it's your book as much as my book. So the only difference is my work comes earlier and you have to adapt to my work, but it has to be your book. I cannot say, okay, this is red, this is white, this is... You cannot do that with a genius like Marte. It's like, no, you live in work, and the book is like skyrocket through the ceiling.
Yeah, I mean, he really elevates anybody that he colors, but you two have such a nice partnership. I think you have a really great partnership with the writers that you work with, too. A story that I always remember is that I think Jonathan Hickman said in the creation of Pog or Pog that instead of writing out what that character looked like, I think he just wrote down, draw a monster. So I'm curious, how much freedom do you have now when a writer comes to work with you? I'm thinking of the characters you created during Ten of Swords. Now Blood Hunt, you created a whole new group of villains. How much freedom are writers giving you when you are getting these new big event books?
Okay. I wouldn't say the term freedom for me implies like a fight to get liberated from something, some kind of boundaries or restraints. It's more like a dialogue and a collaboration. For me, the key for doing comics is I have to turn every work for hire into a personal project for me. Okay. Because it's several reasons, but mostly because I'm going to spend a lot of time doing that. So I need to be comfortable. If I'm drawing a character I don't believe in, or it's not scary for me, or whatever, it's not what the script asks that character to be, then I'm failing my purpose. I'm failing as an artist. So it's more about what do you want to tell, and what can I do to tell it, to reinforce what you want to tell. And in the case of Jet, he gave me a brief description of the characters, and some of them, they are exactly like I did. I mean, I think it was the name of that Damascene, or the one with the curtain over the.
Yes.
Okay, so that one is pretty much straightforward, a vampire, what you can expect. But some of them, they were more open to interpretation. So and in fact, when some of them I gave my ideas. Okay, I'm having ideas, so I put them there. And with others, especially, what was the name of that? It was like unusual. It was nice. It's a story worth telling because we wanted to make it like a constantly changing collage of all the images, like all engravings, like Max Ernst kind of thing. Yeah. But I talked to my brother who works for Free Peak, which is a platform from images. Can we use this? And I talked to Marvel, can we use this kind of images from this kind of image bank? And they told me no way we can use it. So it was like, okay, we cannot do that unless I'm drawing all the collages by hand. It's gonna be too long. So I developed a way to create a character that wasn't drawn, was like modeled with filters, with Photoshop and whatever. You can see my Instagram because there's the process there.
I saw this. So it's for our listeners who haven't seen this, it's a series of parallel lines that then you're distorting with kind of almost like 3D. I'm not quite sure what you're doing to it.
Amplify it, and then the bitmap gets distorted and gets broken, and that kind of shape suggests me to model the character with that, pushing that kind of lines. And it's like, it sounds complicated. It's quite simple, but it gave me something that it has never done before. It was like, okay, I like this guy, and it took me like 5 minutes every time I had to draw him. It's like, okay, it's perfect. So at some point, it's something you want to. The characters are something you want to put in the story. Sometimes it's just what the writer is telling you to do, and sometimes the obstacles you meet in the creative process, they drive you in other direction you never thought, and suddenly it becomes something unexpected and quite fun.
I just want to let you know that our show is all about ranking the X-Men stories, all of them. We're up to about 1,000 coming up soon of individual X-Men stories, and the number one story on our list is House of X, Powers of 10. Yeah. We absolutely love that book, and I think it's kind of a landmark in the history of X-Men. How did it feel to be kind of part of something that was so big in creating a new universe for those characters?
Wow. Okay. It's, everything in this work is weird because we actually developed this work in our studios or little rooms by ourselves, and suddenly one of the books becomes great, becomes something that you say a milestone in the history of the X-Men, which is something that if I travel back in time, I tell my 15-year-old me that you are going to do this. It's like, no way I'm doing this. So most of the time I don't think about it. I don't really think about it. I mean, I know what the book has become, but this is like what I call the second album of Moby. You know Moby, the artist?
Mobius?
Moby was a musician, the musician.
Oh, yeah.
He made a fantastic first album. He licensed all the songs for advertising or whatever, and then he had to put another album. So this is what I call the second album of Moby. It's like, you cannot be thinking about what you just did. You have to think about what you are gonna do, and try to get the best part of that. Is the kind of mind you put on that, the kind of mental process you did for that, apply to the next thing, to keep true to yourself, to keep investigating and learning. Because if not, you are living under the shadow of what you just did. So for me, it's like I'm super happy to have been a part of that. I always say that the script was so good that it would sell like candy, even if it was thrown with sticks and stones. But I'm really proud to the image of Krakoa, the architecture of Krakoa, what we did, all the design of the place. It was that's something that I think I brought to the table, and I'm really proud about it. And I'm glad to have the freedom to do all that. And that Jordan, Jonathan, everyone implied was so open, to accept all our crazy ideas. And I mean, that book changed my life. I said it all the time, but actually that book changed my life.
Yeah.
So obviously I'm glad to be a part of that.
Good. Well, what's exciting is it does not sound like you are ever settling and being okay with just, hey, I'm done. I'm just going to keep doing the same thing. You're always doing something new. So, Pepe,
great, but I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
I just tell a friend, a few minutes ago, like, in my creative process, I only have one hand on the wheel. It's enough to keep the direction going, but there's a lot of stuff happening with my work and with the way I work that I don't really have much say in. It's like I start in the page and sometimes it goes in the direction I want and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
But it goes in an interesting direction. I say, okay, let's go.
That's great.
So I don't really know how to draw like House of X anymore, because I'm not the same guy. I became a father. My life changed. There is some experiences and some things that affect your drawing, that affect the way you look at the world that is in the drawing. So for me, it's amazing. For example, like Chris Bacalo said, okay, this is the way I work. And it's amazing because he's expanded in other directions. But I say, okay,
always changing.
But it's like, okay, my drawing, the way I draw is this, and I'm gonna expand in other things. I'm gonna do colors. I'm gonna do that. But he can't leave it there. Like, give a pause and say, okay, for the next 10 years, I'm gonna draw like this. I just like I don't know how to draw like yesterday. I'm always changing because it's for me it's like it's a changing process all the time.
Well, I'm very excited to see whatever happens next for the rest of your career. Thank you so much for taking a couple minutes today, Pepe.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming.
So we are on. It is October 18th, about 11:14. Here with Kieron Gillen. Kieron, how's the show going for you today?
Magnificent.
Magnificent.
It is. New York is one of my favourite shows. Look, I was just looking, I haven't been out of Artist Alley yet, and I look around, there's so much talent here, so many people so excited for comics. Well, anytime I go to a show, I end up kind of rejuvenated. It's what it's about. So I'm having a hell of a time.
No, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. So you just recently, within like the last 6 months, finished up a big chunk of run on X-Men.
Yep.
Looking back on that, how do you feel?
What's the word? I feel good. Actually, last night.
Good is the word.
Right, it's like I went out last night with a bunch of X-Men writers. We had a little wake because we realised we hadn't actually done a wake for Krakoa.
Mm.
So we gathered together, drank cocktails, and toasted all the mutants. Right, I think we did as good as it's possibly to do with everything that's going on. And there's really, I think especially like I think it's going to be looked back upon as a period of such a strong, pure aesthetic vision. And I'm weird because I came in halfway through.
Right.
So like I was Johnny Con lately, and I was just trying to do honour to all the stories that have been coming in. I think we did okay.
No, good. I'll tell you, I personally enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Got a chance recently to go back to your original run on Uncanny X-Men. You know, when you think back, what's the biggest difference between that era and what you were doing recently?
Right. Not a phrase. I was just actually higher up the totem pole, is the only way to put it. Right. When I was doing Uncanny X-Men for the first time, it was part of two big crossovers, ADX and Schism, and I wasn't writing either of them. And I was writing Uncanny X-Men. So basically, and they were both structured before I came on. So I came on knowing my job is to basically dovetail these. So basically, the stories everyone else had laid out, it's okay, what interesting story is runs alongside these? Whilst when I came on this time, I was, they got 3 events out of me when I was there. You know what I mean? So like that was kind of the major difference, as in I was much more...
You were the one interrupting all the other books instead of...
Yeah. I was like, and I actually really had done so many crossovers. I tried to be kind of like very considerate events.
Absolutely.
You know, like Judgment Day was all about, okay, here's a thing you can put in your book, which you can, it's an emotional story. It's not just punching monsters.
Right.
Here's, what does your character pass or fail? That might be fun for you to do. But like, when I was doing Uncanny X-Men, I always planned for it. I didn't really, for me, it was I steered into the events.
Yep.
Like, I know that's, okay, in 10 issues time, there'll be a schism. So I need to basically build up tension between Cyclops and Wolverine. And then in 10 issues time after that, they'll be fighting the Avengers. So it's 10 issues from X, you know what I mean? I want to make that, instead of making these events these big disruptive things to the story, these events are like the big mountains on the tent poles of the story.
Well, heck, and even between those two, you decided to tie into Uncanny X-Force. So
yeah, oh, God.
we just covered that comic on our podcast last week, so it's fresh on the mind.
That was a soft crossover. You know what I mean? Like,
it was a soft crossover.
It's like we used some of the material that was there. That's that for me is the Marvel Universe. Because the Marvel Universe is a perpetual crossover.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you're outside of the Marvel Universe in general right now, working on a new book, The Power Fantasy. Is probably the most recent one to come out. I know you have plenty more in your back pocket. For folks who are interested in your X-Men work, why should they go check out Power Fantasy?
Honestly, like, the best, if you like my X-Men work, it's the X-Men work, but more so. In the same way, like, I did Young Avengers at Marvel, like, last time I was around, which people liked a lot. And when I was doing that, I had an idea, but not a lot of ideas which are kind of, this will never work at Marvel. Not in the way that Marvel was bad, just kind of, it's not this kind of story.
Yeah.
So we did a book called The Wicked and Divine, which was very successful. And Power Fantasy is basically that for my time on Immortal. I said, okay, here's some ideas I'm interested in, but just not X-Men ideas.
Yep, absolutely.
So, like, if you liked Immortal, it's that, but more so. If you had no interest in Immortal, the basic concept is, okay, superpowers. You've got an idea what that word means.
Yep.
That's not true in our story. Superpowers is a very specific technical definition. The specific technical definition is a being with the power of destruction of the nuclear arsenal of the United States of America. They are literal, superpower means nuclear superpower. There's 6 people with superpowers on Earth, and the future of the Earth is entirely reliant on them never, ever fighting. So it's a story based that you and 5 of your messy mates get the power to end the world, and you basically need to make sure you can never have an argument over who has to clean the sofa, or everyone's fucked. So that's kind of the vibe. It's a Cold War story. It's about tension.
Yep.
And if anyone's read the first issue, you'll go, oh, like, now I get it. I think, okay, this is the sort of things that people do to avoid fighting. But yeah, it's fun. Like, it's dead across 50 years. It's not by Casper Wingard, who is just like...
phenomenal artist.
He's singing, you know what I mean? He's singing.
No, good. Beyond that, what else do you got on your plate? What else should people be looking out for Gillen?
Not much. I mean, like, the next thing is... I've got an OGN with Stephanie Hands, who I've worked with Di.
Yep.
It's called We Call Them Giants. That's out in a couple of weeks' time, at the beginning of... at the end of October.
End of October,
yeah. Which is like 100 pages. It's kind of a YA story. It's about a girl who basically wakes up and there's been some kind of a rapture event that it very rapidly becomes a kind of soft, like Pixar does The Walking Dead, in terms of like, it's a post-apocalypse. And then these giants arrive, all these things they call giants. And it's about communication at the end of the world. And so it's sad, it's romantic, it's very, very beautiful, and it's a completely standalone story. I mean, it's definitely already working on what's next. But really, the main thrust for like the next 6 months is Power Fantasy.
Get that going?
Issue 3's out next week. With like 4 printing. Issue 1's got the 4 printing. Issue 2's got the 3. You know what I mean? Sorry, mid-interview. I'm in an interview.
1 minute, we're about to wrap.
Sorry. Yeah.
Y'all good.
You know what I mean? So like the entire point is it's the big work. You know, we're throwing everything into it, and every issue gets bigger and messier and like more audacious, hopefully. So that's what we're doing. And you know, next year I've got the stuff planned.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, you're obviously a hot commodity at the show. I'm not going to take up any more of your time. Kieron, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here.
Appreciate it. It is October 17th. This is Zach Jenkins. I am here at New York City Comic Con with Al Ewing. Al, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. I got in early. I've acclimatized. I am now wandering the show floor with a mask. But I've taken it off for the benefit of you, humble listeners.
It's
so if I get sick, it's on you.
Listen, it's a convention. I can't make any promises.
Okay.
So Al, you had spent a heck of a lot of time in the X office over the last few years.
Yeah. I am now late of Krakoa.
Late of Krakoa, but I would say that one of the most esteemed and prestigious parts of Krakoa, with all the stuff you were doing with Ayako.
Thank you.
With that coming, that coming full circle, how do you feel about your work looking back on it in that time? Obviously, it was a very specific moment in time for everyone involved. But as you look at that, saying now that it's all wrapped up, are you happy with what you did?
I think I did. I did pretty well. I think, given the brief and the space and the time and the characters and everything, I think I did. I think we all did well. I think we all got a bunch of good stories out of it. I think that's an era that people are going to look back on and say, yeah, that was something special. And future writers will be inspired by in the same way that we were all inspired by our own kind of favorite X eras.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things that I think you took a real shine to was growing your own corner of that universe with Ayako. When you were looking at that, how much of that was based on, knowing that, hey, you have these handful of characters and you got a great artist that you can do some fun work with and designing and finding something new there? And how much of that was just you wanting to do a story that was a bit separate from everything else and leave your own unique mark on the outside?
I mean, I wasn't that worried about doing something that was separate from everybody else because, we were like a team.
Obviously,
it was a team thing. I think from my point of view, when I came into X-Men, I was also at the time the space guy.
Yep.
For a little bit longer, yeah.
You were doing Guardians before that.
I was doing Guardians. So Sword was originally conceived as a kind of almost like an airlock book. It'd be of Krakoa, but also it'd be sort of allow a link to the outside through the Guardians. And a better version of that might have been a sort of Uncanny Avengers book where what we were linking to was Earth, because as it was we were sort of linking to a corner of the Marvel universe that sort of few people care about. But it did mean that when Gerry's giant cosmic planet terraforming thoughts bore fruit, I was ideally placed to be a big part of that and discuss the kind of galactic political implications. And then from there I was kind of well, what does Mars look like? What's it? So I got very deep into that whole culture. But really it was sort of happenstance almost. If I hadn't been the space guy, I'd have probably done something else. I don't know if that would have been because Jonathan's original idea for me, and this is pretty common knowledge at this point, was that I would do the Moira book.
Right.
And I had some big ideas for that. I sent John a long rambling email where I basically broke down all of my thoughts. And at some point, on the 10-year anniversary of Cassara, I'll put that in. That'll be in the back matter, I'm sure. But on the 10th anniversary omnibus edition, look for that in the back matter. Well, it's an email to Marvel. They technically own it. It's I'm
gonna hold them to it from the publishing side.
Yeah. They should do it. It's good back matter. But I did that, and then basically I was also pitching Sword because I needed something to do while we were sort of waiting for me to get the green light to start work on the Moira book.
Because people looking back and not living in that moment may not remember a lot of COVID stuff was going on. There was a lot of questions about what was going to come out, what was the publishing line in general. Are there going to be comics tomorrow? Period.
The only thing that was left on my schedule was Hulk.
Yep.
So
That's Immortal Hulk,
Yeah.
critically acclaimed run that you did for 50 plus issues.
So that was the only one that was sort of too big not to be shuttered for COVID.
Yeah.
So I was sort of doing that, and I was going like, well, let me know when it's time for me to start work on the Moira book, because, you know, I'm not going to like write a bunch of issues and then be told after we need it to be this.
Right.
And basically, yeah, Jonathan in one of the meetings was like, actually, I've had some ideas. I think, you know, we're going to take a vote on whether we should go in such and such a direction instead. And, you know, the rest is speculation. But, like...
It's what could have been, and that's always going to be different in everyone's mind, and everyone's going to think it's going to be the best possible thing ever.
Well, we'll never know, because I never actually got to the point where I was writing it.
Absolutely.
But that was what I was there for. And then I became the Space Guy of X and the Mars Guy of X. Pretty much, it was really me and Sai. But like that was kind of how that came to be, and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I'm pretty happy with how like Ayako turned out. I'm happy that that's one of the pieces that survived.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've got now is this sort of, I know I left it as a sort of weird world type area where there were lots of different countries and factions, and it was like a real sort of like Earth. It was you know, it was kind of conceived by Abigail Brand as this sort of united world, but like
it didn't end up that way.
In actuality, there's a whole bunch of different people with different ideas on it coexisting. That's fine,
right?
But it also means that if somebody wanted to land there and go on a little quest, they could go through all these different areas and encounter all these different people.
Left your own little unique area.
That'd be fun.
Now, last question for you. I think a character that many writers and many esteemed writers, frankly, have struggled with since a while has been Storm, which is a character you did great work with. How much of your writing Storm was you sitting down thinking, I want to figure out what the most badass thing I can do at this very moment is, and then have her do it?
I mean, a lot. That's a big part of it, because like that's kind of what fans are into from Storm. I think they like her to be doing big stuff.
Yes.
At the same time, here's the thing: I have an anathema to like power for power's sake,
absolutely,
and superpowers for superpowers' sake. So like, yeah, I'll do the big feats that do the giant cataclysmic stuff on the page. I got no problem doing that, but also I want to know what the character is doing.
Yes.
So I tried to give her a lot of like character stuff to wrestle with at the same time, a lot of politics stuff. But I mean, my favorite era of Storm is like when she was powerless, because I think powerless heroes are more badass than powerful heroes.
Yeah, you beat up your character so that you can show what's going on with them and build them back up.
But also, that's always been told and told again. What people want now is a super powerful Storm. Yeah, I'm happy to deliver that. I think she ought to be powerful. I think the direction people are taking her now, where she is incredibly powerful, I think that's the right direction. I think that's what you do. And I think you can kind of marry that with the sort of... I mean, I've got nothing but... I'm a reader now. I'm not a writer.
Absolutely.
It's not my place to say what Storm is, but everything I've seen, I'm enjoying. So...
Well, that's fantastic. Now,
good stuff for the future, I reckon.
Now, for folks who... You know, X-Men fans tend to be very insular, all things considered. No one's going to argue that. For folks who may not have followed you to where you're going next, what do you got on your plate right now?
I'm doing Venom. Venom War is ongoing. Once that's over, we're going to be into all new Venom. I'm also doing the Immortal Thor. It's kind of like I guess you could call it a quasi sequel to Immortal Hulk, but it's its own thing, and it's all about Thor, and it's like high fantasy, but it touches on some similar themes. And then for DC, I'm doing Absolute Green Lantern, and it's been announced that I'm doing Metamorpho.
That's right, Metamorpho.
And everybody's going to be hearing a lot more about both of those tomorrow.
Well, that's exciting. Folks, keep up with the news on that. Al, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
All right, I am here with artist extraordinaire David Marquez. Dave, how's your con going so far?
It's been busy. It's good, but been busy.
Doing a lot of commission work, it looks like?
A lot of commissions, a lot of just signing comics, a lot of Uncanny fans showing up. So, yeah, it's been a good time.
Well, let's start with that. So, you are now on the flagship famous title of Marvel Comics, Uncanny X-Men. How were you selected for this job?
It was actually kind of just serendipitous timing. I had spent a year kind of out of the big two, doing my own thing, and was looking at kind of dipping my toes back into like a regular, Wednesday comic crowd. And when I reached out to Marvel to kind of see what they had cooking, they said, well, we got a couple things going, including some X-Men stuff. My ears picked up and started chatting, and I grew up reading X-Men comics. Uncanny was like the first comic I ever really got hooked into.
Yeah.
So as we were kind of talking about the possibility of doing one of these relaunches, when Tom Brevoort, the editor, mentioned Uncanny, Gail Simone, and here's the lineup, I just leapt at it.
So one of the things that you've had an opportunity to do with this lineup is actually do some costume redesigns. The ones that are really jumping out to me are Jubilee and, some touches with Wolverine. How did you approach that? What was the impetus for redesigning these characters who have classic looks?
I think a big part of it was that for the characters where I had a very strong visual attachment to a classic costume, I wanted to honor that.
Yeah.
But also kind of put my kind of like modern flavor on top of. So like my Gambit costume, my Rogue costume are updated versions of their classic costumes. And the Wolverine, that's one where there's a lot of editorial input on that one. There's a movie coming out, et cetera, et cetera. But kind of a similar thing. Classic, gold and blue with some of my more like modern like lines attached to it. Jubilee, I did a much more involved redesign with. But I was trying to looking at what her costume was like in the 90s, it was like teenage clothes, but like kind of street comfortable attire, but like superhero-y. And what are the youths wearing today,
Okay.
And use that as a foundation for it.
Yeah.
It's a lot of it was kind of like wanting to honor the what I think of as being like the definitive look for the characters, which for a lot of them are Jim Lee designs. And then kind of like update them with I want it with my flavor, with a modern sensibility, clean up some of the lines a little bit in the way that I like to, and then, see how it works. People will notice that as the issues will go on, and I do this with all my books, they're going to change a little bit as I figure out I hate drawing that over and over again. I'm going to change that a little bit. Hope the editors don't notice. But.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you maybe make something just a smidge too complicated and once you've drawn it 20 times.
Well, funny story. So the other fun thing I got to do is there are 4 new characters called the Outliers.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that as well.
Yeah. Now the Outliers, they are X-Men, to be clear. It's not that they're a completely separate team. They're going to be integrated, but right now we're calling them the Outliers. Jitter, Ransom, Calico, and Death Dream. And Jitter in particular, she's kind of the personification of ADHD, which for me, I identify with very strongly. And I purposefully made her costume very complicated, very busy, very not organized in clear, obvious ways. And I knew it was going to be a pain in the ass to draw, and it is a pain in the ass to draw. And I had to come up with my own little map for how to draw it, step by step. First draw these lines, then draw those lines, and I have to reference that every single effing panel I draw of her.
Well, and it's not just that. When Jitter activates her powers, you're drawing her multiple times in a single frame, so you've really got your work cut out for you.
I do, but they're real sketchy on purpose. That was a case where, okay, if I'm designing this power, I want to be able to draw without having to, do, the really... when you do, Daredevil, Spider-Man, some other characters do that kind of thing where you'll see them in, multiple poses as they move quickly from scene to scene, or Flash, Quicksilver, etc. I didn't want to have to spend a lot of time doing that. So, I decided to embrace my any sketchiness, drawing-wise, and keep it a little sketchy. But you're right. She involves a lot of work.
So, each of these characters is brand new. How much of this was Gail and her vision versus her saying, here's an idea, let's see, where David takes it? How did that come about?
They are really a collaborative project. I'll start off by saying, some people will give writers grief for doing less work than artists do for any given comic. It takes less time, etc. And while there's an element of truth to that, having written as well, I think also we shouldn't discount the fact that they start with a blank page in a way that even artists don't.
Sure.
And so, in all cases, there was at the very least a multi-paragraph idea that she started with. As she and I started going back and forth with the characters, that changed a lot. As we did the classic improv thing of yes-anding. The characters change back and forth. Oh, what about this? Oh, what about this? Oh, what about this? Next thing you know, like, the character looks different, their powers are different, etc. So, like, it was a very, like, drawn out in a positive way, but like it was a very long, collaborative thing where, by the end of it, it was hard to suss out exactly where. If you look at the character now, was that just Gail's idea? Was that just David's idea? No, it was a combination of both of us, kind of throwing ideas against the wall, and it being kind of the parts being greater than, or the wholes being greater than the part.
Do you find the same thing when you're working off of Gail's scripts, that you have the freedom to kind of do the layouts that you want, or is she very prescriptive in the way that she wants the pages to look?
No, I mean, she is a very, very flexible writer to work with. And I think that most writers who I have worked with are that way. Where they want the artist to be able to explore what they want to do on the page, so long as it's honoring what they do. They're not like rewriting the thing on the page, you know. But no, Gail has been very, very generous as a collaborator, giving me space to kind of do a lot of stuff. And like, generally speaking, I don't have a need to deviate much from what's there. Yeah, sure, I may change, exactly what the panel, like what the angle of the shot might be or whatever, but she's an excellent writer, and I don't have a need to change what's there. I will find maybe my own way of expressing what she's trying to get across that may deviate a little bit from the way that she described it, but like the dialogue doesn't need to change at all, and the heart of it is all right there. So it is, again, a collaborative, project.
Now, your style in general, your characters always look absolutely gorgeous. They're beautiful people, and I'm curious how it is for you to have to draw a character like Sarah Gaunt, who is like this monstrous, like, forest creature, essentially. How does that work for you?
Yeah, no, I mean, I do like drawing pretty people, and it's nice when people are responding well to that. I don't know how it is that I've fallen into doing a lot of horror-themed stuff over the past, 5 or 6 years. Like, there's a horror aspect to my Batman Superman run, and that was a time where I really wasn't that into it. I've gotten more into cosmic horror, especially recently, and I have a long history reading that kind of stuff. I kind of like drawing scary stuff now, so it doesn't feel foreign to me. And it can be nice to kind of contrast the clean and pretty stuff with something that's gritty, something that's scary, something that's dark and bloody, and it's also something that X-Men hasn't spent a lot of time delving into. It has here and there. You have the Shadow King stuff as one example, but horror is not something that I typically associate with X-Men.
Sure.
And it's something that we're kind of exploring. I don't know how. I don't think this was intended to become the horror X-Men book, and I'm not saying that is all of what it is, but that is certainly a flavor that we are kind of running with. And I think we have a lot of really exciting stuff wrapped into that coming up.
On the same line as pretty people that you are very good at drawing, one of the flashback plot lines here involves Professor Xavier and Sarah Gaunt. Now, I was joking with Bernard Chang about this last year because he did a Phoenix Jean Grey miniseries where he really made Xavier look like yassified. We were joking about it, right? So how do you approach trying to draw Xavier as a young, kind of hot version of himself, which is not how we normally picture him in the present?
I won't lie. Yul Brynner was an inspiration.
Okay.
But I didn't want to do a Yul Brynner likeness,
Yeah.
But I looked at him. A lot of the actors who have. Classically, Yul Brynner was a visual inspiration for Jack Kirby for drawing Professor Xavier. So that was the inspiration for that. Then looking at James McAvoy, having more recently, just trying to get a sense of who has played him recently as a young person, and what made that work, what made it not work.
Yeah.
And then even looking at some like Jim Lee's Professor Xavier, who didn't look old, didn't look young, you know, but
suddenly a little jacked.
Yeah, but but wasn't what we think of now of being kind of in the movie, realm anyway. He's not an old man, right? So those are some of the points of reference that I used, but it's you gotta have the eyebrows,
of course,
and what were some of the more defining features, and how can I make sure that it looks like Xavier, but he's a young guy.
Yeah,
you know.
All right, I know you have to eat because it sounded like you skipped lunch.
Yes.
So I do want to ask you, but just a couple minutes ago, Tommy B stopped by, conductor of X. One of the things you mentioned, just offhand, was the fact that this book is coming out 18 times a year. It's not quite bi-monthly, but how is it keeping up with this schedule on the book that you're the marquee name on?
It's a challenge. I mean, I am not a monthly artist, and I'm not, and this is not a monthly book, so there's that. If you were to just look at the math doesn't work out for me to draw the whole book. I can't.
Yeah.
It's a challenge. Marvel has been very kind to me that when I emphasize I want to do runs, I don't want to do issues here and there, that they listen, and we are all working to try to make that happen. Now what that will mean is that there'll be gaps between my runs. While I'm not comparing myself as an artist, this was done similarly with Frank Quitely back during the New X-Men days, where he would have an arc, and then there would be other artists who came in and did wonderful work, and then he would have another arc. And that's kind of the way I want to approach this, where not where it's main story and not main story, but when I'm on, I'm telling a complete story.
A complete arc.
Yeah, exactly. But what happens in between is that's the main book as well, and that will be influencing. I'll be picking up, the ball that other people have been playing with. It's a challenge. I wish I could draw the entire book. That is not what I signed up for, and so I accept, this bed, what I made.
David, thank you so much for taking some time. I do hope that you eat something before the end of the day, and I hope you have a great weekend.
Hey, thanks, man. It was a blast.
Alrighty, we got Declan Shalvey here. What is it, the 18th? I don't know.
It's Thursday.
Thursday of NYCC. Did I say your last name right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, good enough. So Declan, you are currently working on Mystique, just came out this week. I think in recent years it's been rare to see you doing art and writing on a book that is not creator-owned. What made Mystique the right choice for you to jump over and do some work for hire again?
I think the money.
Okay.
No. I wrote and drew and colored Hulk one-shot, an annual for Immortal Hulk.
Yeah.
That was, and I hadn't colored myself, and that was a great experience.
Right.
Which made me go into the creator-owned. I wrote and drew and colored my old dog book.
Yep.
So coming back to Marvel, the Mystique was a project that kind of suited me. It was very similar to Old Dog.
Yeah.
It was right in my wheelhouse.
Which, for folks who don't know, Old Dog, it's a spy thriller, widescreen, big action-heavy book.
Exactly, yeah. Which is what this is. It just has a shapeshifter in it. So
absolutely.
That's helpful.
I mean, Old Dog may or may not. So.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, you never. Yeah, actually, that's a fair point. But it was when Tom Brevoort was taking over at the X-Men books.
Yep.
I was a sad fan and just emailed saying, any chance I could write one of them?
Right.
And he said, well, I didn't know you'd be interested. So we talked a bit and about what I'd be into doing, and then some books were proposed, and Mystique being one of them. My friend Nate Stockman said, you have to do it.
Right.
I said, why? He said, because you can draw whatever you want.
Yep.
I was like, oh yeah. And that's the thing, the appeal from being, because there's a lot of, I would be a little bit anxious because Brian K. Vaughan did this amazing run back in the early 2000s.
Right.
Who the hell am I to do one? But I thought if I'm doing it as a cartoonist, I think there's a slightly different edge to it. So for me, it felt like doing a new Marvel book, because I love Marvel. I always love doing stuff there. To just kind of take the reins and just take a character. And I think what I said, I wanted to do Vision.
Yep.
from the ashes. I want to do like
the Tom King.
Yeah, I want to do the character
mission.
piece.
Yes.
But if you don't know anything about the character, you can come in and get something out of it, and then step out. And I'm in a weird place right now where I seem to be getting those types of projects.
Yep.
And I really, really enjoy them. I just get to do my own stamp, flesh things out, even if I was just doing covers and stuff like that.
Yep.
But with Seek, I'm actually, channeling all the like childhood X-Men love, and so I think I'm not answering your question at all. I just went off 100 times.
The talking is the interview.
Okay.
That's okay. So you had you'd previously worked on some other X-Men stuff with Return of Wolverine back 5-7 years ago, something like that. Did some stuff with the X-Men Unlimited stuff with Hickman when they were rolling that out. What makes this project different for you?
Well, it's mine. Working with John was class, and getting to do something different and like a different kind of medium was challenging and a really good like artistic project to kind of work on. Return of Wolverine, I mean, I was a fill-in guy. Nobody was coming. Everybody wanted to see McNiven, and they got Declan Shalvey. Nobody was coming for me, I don't think. So this is, I feel like the first project, like, I don't mean proper as in Unlimited stuff isn't, but like drawing in the US comic format is the way I like to tell
It's the traditional format. It's a floppy.
It is, yeah. Like the Vertigo stuff was fun, but it doesn't feel natural to me. Whereas this case, I'm getting to do it in the format that I like, in the universe that I'd love to play around in. I've never gotten to do that. Hulk is the closest one, but that was a one shot.
Yeah.
This is a mini series where I really get to sink my teeth into something like, say, Moon Knight, but it's all me as opposed to like working with a writer.
Yep. Now, speaking of Moon Knight, speaking of your whole approach to doing art, it feels, at least to me, that you are kind of the last bastion of kind of like the widescreen comics format that guys like Cassidy were doing back in the early 2000s. What about that approach is appealing to you as you're telling these big action stories?
That's a good question. I feel that working in that format allows scope and a way of controlling the reader's eye in a way that, say, more standard kind of a grid storytelling does. I mean, I still use the grid here and there, but I feel like with the wider panels, I can really control where the reader goes and really control. I feel like pacing is kind of something I'm good at.
Yep.
Sometimes the grid is the best way to do it, but like that breaks from maybe what else has been happening this year. I feel my set standard storytelling, the pace that comes with it, is kind of, I don't know what a Shelvey book is necessarily, but I think if there is a feel to one, that's a big part of it.
Awesome. Well, I know you got to grab lunch. Definitely appreciate the time. Thank you so much. You have a great show.
Cheers, man.
It is October 19th, like 3:30. Zach Jenkins here with Chris Condon. Chris, how are you doing today? You got a big announcement this weekend, Junya.
Yes. I'm so excited that the news is finally out there because I've been sitting on it for a while now. But I am writing Ultimate Wolverine for Marvel. Super excited to be reimagining this classic Marvel character.
Well, and it's exciting. So I'll be honest, I missed the panel. I had an actual job to do that morning.
That's fair.
So what can you tell us about the book? It's coming out. Who are you working with on it?
So it's Alessandro Capuccio.
Okay.
He's doing the artwork on it. He's fantastic. Just even from his concept sketches of what Ultimate Wolverine would look like,
which is definitely a deviation from what people expect from Wolverine.
Absolutely, and that was, we had that in mind right from the start. We wanted it to feel different. Obviously, have a flavor of Wolverine in there, but feel different. And one of the main things that we did to try to differentiate him just a little bit was we wanted to put a muzzle on him.
Yep.
And I think that might also give an indication of what he is in this universe. He's a little too wild to be out there without that muzzle. He's a little unpredictable.
Now that's exciting. So what about Wolverine as a character kind of drew you to this assignment?
Well, I've always loved Wolverine. I used to be the kid who was walking around with a blue and yellow costume on, and I had my claws out all the time. Writing all the issues. I have my Wolverine toy, my blue and yellow, from the early 90s, right next to me, right next to my coffee mug as I'm writing every issue. I absolutely love the character. I mean, first of all, just aesthetically.
Yeah.
he's the coolest. Whether it's, with the mask, which is one of the best masks, right? One of the best costumes, whether you're talking about the brown and yellow, the blue and yellow, you got the three claws that he has, it's just such an iconic image. Mm-hmm. But also just of the character. I love he has a dark past. He's a very noirish past.
Yep.
He's a very noirish character, and that's something that I've always been drawn to. I said this on that panel that I was on, but Barry Windsor Smith's Weapon X,
yes.
Marvel Comics Presents, is, in my mind, with something like Batman Year One of the greatest comics of all time.
The conceit of our show, just so you know, is that we are ranking every X-Men comic from best to worst. I believe Weapon X is in the top 10 of that. I'm not sure where off the top of my head, but it's up there.
It's, for my money, as a writer artist, a singular vision. It is one of the greatest.
There is an argument to be made.
Yes.
I would sit there and listen every time I go back to it. I get very impressed with what they put on the page there and what they let him do.
I'm just going to nerd out for a second.
Go on.
Here's why I love Weapon X. How he does the lettering. You go around the panel. It's unusual in comics to do it that way, but it's unique, different, and that's why outside of just the amazing artwork, just super detailed artwork. And just I don't know, it's like akin to body horror. It's just it adds so much depth to the character, and to his origin. I think it's one of the greatest achievements in comics. At least in superhero comics, if not the entirety of comics.
It's Barry Windsor Smith's pretty darn good.
Absolutely. I mean, just the Fantagraphics book, Monsters.
Yep.
Which I could sing his praises all day.
Absolutely. Now, one thing that I think is interesting about having an Ultimate Wolverine is that one of the big selling points of Wolverine as a character for many years was that you don't really know what the guy's deal is.
Yeah.
And now we know a lot of what the guy's deal is. How is it for you to go into this and get kind of that fresh slate of, you know the tropes of Wolverine, but you don't know this character, this world, doing this?
Well, it's interesting because you want to keep the DNA in there a little bit. But what we're doing is we're taking what that core character is, and we're subverting and diverting, and we've made, obviously, in the solicits and the PR release, the press release, they say what he is. He's Winter Soldier in this Ultimate Universe. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to take that idea of this mysterious character with a shady past, a mysterious past, not even he knows his past, and really play with that and make something that is intriguing, a little bit scary, and just something that for Wolverine fans will feel fresh, new, but also totally Wolverine.
That's exciting. Now, X-Men fans are a notoriously insular bunch.
Yes.
Well, for folks who may be hearing of you for the first time on this, what should they take a look at to get a feel for your vibe, what you've enjoyed, what have you been putting out that you are really proud of and that you think folks should look at before hitting up Ultimate Wolverine?
Well, thank you for asking that. I am the writer of a book called That Texas Blood with Jacob Phillips. And the Enfield Gang Massacre, which was a Wild West. It's a Western spinoff of That Texas Blood. And I would point people towards those 4 books. There's 3 volumes of That Texas Blood, and there's 1 volume of the Enfield Gang Massacre. That's a one-and-done story. The reason I would point people towards those to read, while they're, they don't deal with mutants, we don't have...
I didn't know they told comics without mutants, so, this is news to me.
But, it's a little bit more grounded. But the reason why I'm pointing people towards those would be not just because I wrote them, but because what Will Moss is allowing us to do in the Ultimate Universe is to really put our spin on things, truly.
Yes.
It is the closest to a creator-owned book that you can do at Marvel.
Right.
And that is what is so exciting about it as a creator, is that this is not, okay, so let me put it this way. I'm on the phone with Will Moss.
Yep.
And he tells me, Marvel owns these characters, but between you and me, you own these characters. And that is how he approaches the Ultimate Universe. So when Dennis Camp is doing something in the Ultimates, he is putting his own spin on it, and I think it's pretty clear that he's doing that. Same thing with Ultimate Spider-Man and Ultimate X-Men, and now with Ultimate Wolverine. We are truly being allowed to run with these characters and do what we want with them. Obviously, it gets approved down the line, but it is truly a creator-owned or a creator-centric, creator-owned feel at Marvel.
You just have to look at what Peach is doing with Ultimate X-Men, which is wildly different than what you've seen from other X-Men stuff, but truly a Peach Momoko comic.
Absolutely, 100%. And I would absolutely say the same thing of Dennis Camp's work in Ultimates. It's a really unique and interesting time to be creating comics. Creators are forward right now. Creators are the thing right now, and thank God for that, because
absolutely
that is what will make comics continue. It's not going to be just the fact that it's IP. It's not going to be just the fact that it's got Wolverine on it. It's got to be good. And how do you get a good book? You get good creators on it. And when you have an artist like Alessandro Cappuccio, who is doing some of the most fantastic work in superhero comics and Moon Knight, and it's now going to be doing that in Ultimate Wolverine, I think you're going to have one of the most beautiful, different, and brutal books out there, I think.
That's awesome. Chris, thank you so much for the time. Hope you have a great show.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
I am here with the artist of Sentinels, Justin Mason. Justin, how is your con going so far?
So far, it's busy. The best way to put it, it's a packed house, and it's the first day, so I expect it's going to get crazier.
Oh, yeah, it's only going to get busier from here. So, Justin, you just had Sentinels #1 drop, I think, last week. Yeah, how are you feeling about the reception to the book so far?
Honestly, I'm very happy with it, because everybody I've seen some negative stuff, but it's the positives outweighed it, and it's been great because they've actually talked about how good the art is, and I appreciate that, because I feel like when I did Spider-Punk in the past and some other things, they always say, yeah, it's a great book, but I don't think they've ever really specifically dug deep into the art as they have on the first issue of Sentinels. So it's been really nice to hear the feedback on how well they love how it's drawn. I've had people compare me to Mark Silvestri, which is that's a big compliment. I didn't really necessarily try to do that, but if that's what they're feeling, then I really appreciate that.
I think that one of the things that Silvestri's an interesting hallmark to go back to, but I also felt like there was a real indie comic sensibility to the way you're drawing and the way you're making your marks on the page. I almost felt like there was a Kevin Eastman quality to what it was that you were doing. But what you're talking about is interesting, because your book definitely does not have a house style to what a lot of Marvel books look like. So when it came time to approaching somebody for this book, how did you get associated with it?
Honestly, before I finished Spider-Punk, the second run, they just contacted me. It was just like, hey, we see you're about to finish up, and are you interested in doing something in the X world? And I was like, I can't say no to more work. So, and they threw that offer on the table, and it sounded fun. I mean, like I said, I'm a X fan, but I've never been the biggest X fan in the world, obviously. I don't know a lot of the ins and outs. A lot of you guys do. So, being able to play in like that robotic Sentinel stuff, I was like, okay, that seems pretty fun. So, that's how that come about.
Well, and what you're describing is interesting too, because these characters are all people with sort of Sentinel robot parts, right? How do you go about distinguishing each of these characters from each other when they all have sort of similar robotic components?
Just a lot of sketching and figuring out the characters. So, I mean, we had an idea. Obviously, it's like, we now know it's nanotech, and it's, it's similar vibes of what the Sentinels look like, but I was just trying to find different shapes, different forms that got to play with, that maybe that would match that character and how they act. I don't know, like shoulder pads, like bigger here and there. Just tried to play off of the characters. What's the word? Just their who they were. What would they shine? What would they pull out? From that stuff. So yeah, it was a lot of back and forth, but it was a lot of fun figuring that out.
The other thing, which I think getting the sense of is going to happen in this book, we got Omega Red in the first issue, but it seems like you get to kind of play with a rogues gallery of villains as you're writing this book too. How fun is that?
That was fun. They asked me the moment I started, do you want to draw anybody specific? And Omega Red was the only one that came to mind, but he was actually already in play. So I was like, okay. And I think I was gonna mention like Toad and stuff like that, them guys. But that didn't ever come to play. But we did do the Blob in there for a little bit, which was super cool. There's more to come, so it'll be fun to see all these other characters show up that we got to explore of the X-Men Rogues Gallery.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, Onslaught appears on the last page, which I assume is just a kind of a paranoid projection from one of the characters, but even so, it's fun to see you taking on these characters in the way that they appear.
Yeah, that was, because during the Onslaught event of the 90s, I was a kid, so I didn't really get into it at that moment, but it was really cool to be able to draw that character and, in the timeline, and, it ain't no spin-off side thing. It's just like, hey, this is actually happening right now. It was just cool to be able to touch base on that, especially like Onslaught and that character in general. So yeah, I had fun.
So parts of this book are actually, it does seem like they're happening kind of in the basement of Gale and David Marquez's book. So like, how much communication do you have to have with that creative team just to make sure that you're getting some of the details right so that it doesn't look like a completely different situation?
I think the writer, Alex, and our editor, I think they pretty much had it all figured out. They would send me just snippets of, from the other books. Be like, hey, this is kind of what we're doing. They didn't really, we didn't try to nail anything on the head exactly. Tried to get it as close as we could, obviously, because it'd just be too tedious to try to match another artist, what they're doing. But at least, hopefully you can get the sense of we're in the same area.
Yeah, I think that's very clear. So you've described, even before we started recording, and you've said it now, that you're not huge into X-Men. Are you more of a Spider-Man guy? What is your Marvel fandom that you just absolutely love?
Yeah, I would definitely say Spidey. Spidey stuff's my favorite. Like the Venom, symbiotes type stories. I don't know, something about those. Though that was what as a kid, appealed to me majorly. So, hands down, definitely Spider-Man for sure.
So if you had a dream project of something you'd like to do, I mean, you are playing in the X sandbox now, right? And you've had a chance to do some Spider-Man work with Spider-Punk. Is there something that you would just love to do as part of your career?
I would love to draw, obviously, The Amazing Spider-Man. That's a dream, obviously, but that's one of those, it may not happen as soon as I'd like. So I understand that. So if I could have something that would be just awesome to work on, Ghost Rider. Daredevil would be fun. Some Venom book, but I really think Ghost Rider would be the book that I would absolutely love to just tear into.
Awesome. Well, Justin, I think the work on Sentinels is fantastic. I'm enjoying the book so far. I'm looking for more of it to come out. So congratulations. And I hope you have a great con.
Thank you so much, man. I appreciate you having me on this. And maybe next time, the next series, we'll be able to do it again.
All right. Thank you, Justin.
All right. It is Sunday, October 20th, 11:01 a.m. I am on the artist alley floor with Gerry Duggan. Gerry, how are we doing today? How's the show going for you?
It's been a great show. I still have my voice on a Sunday, which is miraculous. It was wonderful meeting so many Krakoan expats and fans of the new books. So I've had a wonderful show. How was yours?
You know what? It's been truly a delight. This is my first New York Comic-Con.
Oh, wow.
So being able to get out, see the city, see a bunch of friends, folks that I've met through doing comics, it's been phenomenal.
Yeah.
Now, earlier this year, you wrapped up your time on the Krakoa stuff. Looking back on it, how do you feel? You spent a heck of a lot of time, one of the first guys to be involved even before books came out. So looking back, how was that for you?
I mean, it's a huge part of my creative output, and was such an important part of my life during COVID, as the world sort of ground to a halt, and we weren't 100% sure even if we were publishing new material for a moment there, whether we might be pausing or whether we might be going digital first.
Right.
But I got to be the first fan of Hawks and Pox, really. This goes back for me to 2018, and immediately after hearing Jonathan's pitch in the editorial retreat, I started marinating in Marauders. That book came together pretty quickly,
right?
And then I got to knock around, and what a privilege it was to not just write those characters, my favorite comic book ever, but then also to work with so many talented writers and artists and editors, and to be able to write the words "the end" or "the end for now" is always a privilege in our business, as these stories are built not to end.
Right.
So it feels even more special for that, and I'm very proud of how Kieron and Al and I and Jordan and every guest artist, every artist that came back. Obviously, we wouldn't have been there at all without Pepe and RB from the beginning. What a murderer's row of talent.
Incredible.
And how lucky I am.
No, it was an incredible lineup, a very singular moment for comics that you don't get often. Now, moving forward, you got a couple of things in the works right now. Falling in Love on the Path to Hell has been out. Got a couple of issues on the way on that?
I've been thrilled. It can be a difficult proposition sometimes launching a comic book that doesn't have Bad Ears and doesn't have Spider-Man. There's no thwips. But, I am so thrilled at the response. We launched issue 1 in June, and we're preparing, our 5th reprint of the first issue, and we only have 5 issues out. So this past week, we had I think a lovely issue that Gerry Brown just destroyed himself on. It's a beautiful book, and we're very privileged to have a Frank Miller guest cover on it, which blew my mind. So that's available this week at New York Comic Con. It's in your comic shops, and we're planning a really long run. I want to thank everyone that pre-ordered it, and thank the retailers, and obviously the fans that are reading us.
Yep.
You've given us the rope to be able to tell a long story. Right. I really do think eventually we're going to have multiple volumes and an omnibus. So I know what the end is. Sometimes I write backwards, and now I know that I have a lot of rope to enjoy before I have to have a bittersweet farewell.
And the farewells can be bittersweet, but it doesn't mean that everything's over. Just moving on to the next thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, the other thing I have coming up is a soft cover of my photography book. It's coming up. Its final orders are due early in November, and it's on sale later in November. It is a labor of love. It was a COVID project. When the world stopped, I was working on X-Men comics, and I was also assessing what I had over many, many years of photography. And, I hope I am one of your favorite comics creators, but if I'm not, I almost certainly have photographed some of your favorite comic book creators. And they're really, I think, fun photos, and there is a story there, and it ended up being each one of these photos tells an individual story, and together they do sort of tell mine. So I'm proud of it.
It's exciting. Beyond that, Gerry, anything else you got going on? Anything you want to make sure folks know about? Where they can find
sure. For fans that miss Krakoa, you may want to head out to the West Coast, sunny West Coast. I am writing West Coast Avengers for Danny Kim.
Yep.
And Firestar's story is continuing over there. It's a great mix. It's a team book that's a little bit different. The concept was initially work release Avengers.
Yep.
We're going to be cycling in some folks that need redemption. And Firestar is honestly having a very difficult time post-Krakoa, and is really, the shorthand version is she's got a little PTSD from her experience going undercover in Orcus, which she didn't prepare for, right?
Right.
Gala,
it happens.
She was basically deployed as a double agent telepathically by Jean, And, it's a very Gene thing to have done. So,
Just to kind of say, we're doing this now.
yes. Guess what? You're on the X-Men. This is the cost of being on the X-Men. Go try to save everyone. And she really had so many little important moments, but the cost to her was high.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to explore the flip side of that. The cost of it is going to be cool.
Well, that's exciting. Gerry, thank you so much for the time. Thank you so much for all the comics over the years. Really appreciate it. Can't wait to see what you got going on next.
Cheers, bud. I appreciate you. Have a great show.
Sunday, October 20th, 11:10 a.m. You're on the floor with Josh Cassara. Josh, how's the show going for you today?
It's going great. This is my second New York Comic Con, and I love it. You have literally the greatest artists in the world all collected in one room.
I've been on bigger show artist alley floors. I've never seen a floor this dense with talent.
I completely agree.
It is. You run into some of the best artists in the world just turning around. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Now you are obviously one of the standout artists from the Krakoa time on X-Men. Kind of, I don't want to say I know, but was not probably a big name right before X-Force, and then blew up after that. And you're continuing to do that with working with Percy on Deadpool and Wolverine coming up in the near future.
Yeah.
What's that experience been like for you, having your career kind of go through these changes?
Well, long story short is I was 13 years old when X-Force #1 came out, the first one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And 13-year-old me was eating every moment of that up.
Yep.
And so when they came to me and said, we're going to redo X-Force under the Jonathan Hickman era, it was like surreal and amazing. And they're like, and Wolverine's going to be on the team too. So, it was like my little kid dreams come true. And I got to draw him every single day. And working with Ben is just amazing. He's just this crazy psychopath of ideas and storytelling. And like we just bounce back and forth. And actually, even when we haven't worked together, like we message each other all the time.
Yep.
And we've been in constant contact, and all of a sudden we're back. Team's back together.
Yep. No, that's exciting. So, from your perspective as an artist, how do you think you have evolved and changed from your styles over the years? Is it just getting a little bit tighter, or what do you think is different about how you approach doing the work these days?
Yeah, I guess if you look back to some of my early Marvel work with like a Falcon or maybe the Sentry, it's a little rougher, a little grittier. I guess I polished up a little bit more in a sense. But then I think my storytelling has gotten a lot stronger.
Yeah.
And then I've had to now get used to drawing many characters as far as like storytelling in a team book.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something I didn't really have to do, and I had to really adjust to, because a lot of panels, and you have to, accentuate like which character is doing this and that and who should be primary focus, and I've really learned to handle that in a different way. But then now I kind of almost want to go to a little bit of a more grittier, rougher look.
Right.
Let's usually go to Deadpool, Wolverine, where half the time they're going to be all torn up and ripped up and shot up. So looking forward to that.
It's a bit of a different approach than the superhero X-Men team book that you were on for a couple of years and all that.
Yes. It's just going to be buddy cop violence.
Yes. Now, absolutely, I think the iconic thing from your time on X-Men is probably the Green Lagoon Tiki Bar.
Yeah.
I would say a close second is the issue where you made Havoc's hat get bigger and bigger every time. At what point did your editor say, Josh, this is too large of a hat?
It's funny because what happened was I had drawn it, and then the second time I drew it, it was like bigger. It was obviously bigger. And
right.
It wasn't conscious at all.
Yeah.
But then I went back, and then when I went to draw the third time, I looked back at my two drawings I'd already have, and I was like, okay, it got bigger. And then I just slowly, incrementally just made it more and more ridiculous. And nobody said a thing until I got to like the end, and they're finally like, this thing got really, because like once they like reviewed the whole issue, they're like, it got really big, but they said, okay, they didn't even like, the best part is just kind of the running joke where every like sketch I do of Havoc, his thing gets even bigger and bigger and just almost off the page.
No, that's awesome. That is awesome. So beyond Deadpool and Wolverine, anything you got on your plate? Anything that you want folks to know about?
Well, I'm going to be doing that. It's Deadpool, Wolverine, Ben Percy and I back together again. It's a 80s action movie with an unlimited budget, with the grit of an indie book. But and I'm doing the covers and the interiors for that. I'm also doing the main covers for the Fantastic Four, which I took over after a young and up and coming artist named Alex Ross And it was extremely intimidating to take over on that end. And my editors allayed my fears by telling me we wanted you because you don't try to be Alex Ross or you're not anything like him.
Yeah.
So that made me feel much better about what I was doing, and then they let me just go and get really creative on that end. And I'm really happy because I always ask Tom Brevoort, the editor at Fantastic Four, before I'm done with Marvel, let me draw at least one issue of the Fantastic Four, especially if the thing is featured in the issue. And instead, I'm getting to do the covers, so I don't worry about the interiors.
No, that sounds exciting. Josh, thank you so much for the time. Hope you have a great rest of the show.
Cheers.
All right, I am here with Jackson Lanzing, one of the writers of NYX. Jackson, how's your con going so far?
Honestly, I got off a plane and basically rolled onto the con floor, so I smell like an airplane, I have no voice, I have no energy, and I'm thrilled. It's great. I love it, man. New York Comic Con, let's go.
That's great. NYX has been really a fun book since the first issue.
Thank you.
How did you decide what the cast was going to be of this book? Because it's a really interesting mix of characters.
Yeah, so Colin and I have had the opportunity, right? Colin Kelly, my writing partner, and I, we've had an opportunity a lot recently to do team books between Star Trek and Thunderbolts and Outsiders and NYX. It's been a while since we've done like a solo character book. And so we have a kind of a process for going through putting together a team, and it effectively comes down to drafting. We will sit down, the two of us, just like we would when we were 18 and talking about who we'd want to be on our X-Men teams, at 2 a.m. at a diner, which is totally a thing we did back when we were teenagers. And now we just do that professionally. So for NYX, it was actually pretty easy because we knew we wanted to center Kamala. That was sort of moment one. That was the only thing that Marvel had, right? Okay. Marvel had, we want to do a book with Kamala. It's probably called NYX. Yeah. That was literally all they had, right? A lot of the other books were more sort of thought through editorially, and then some of them were completely changed by the writer. Like X-Force is like a completely different book than what sort of Marvel was going to do, because Jeff Thorne has had this X-Force pitch in his pocket. Yeah. I mean, I've known Jeff for like a decade. He's been pitching me that book for as long as I know him. This was a book where Marvel knew they had Kamala, and they knew they had a New York, and so they were like, maybe some other characters. And maybe this doesn't have to be a team book. Maybe it can be more of a community book. And we said, yes, that's what we want to do. Community-oriented book about sort of a Viking funeral for Krakoa, where we show how we're going to take this culture, this language, this religion, this mutant pride that we've established now over several years of Krakoa that matters a lot to us, it matters a lot to the fans, and we want to make sure that it not just sticks, but that it gets interrogated, that we understand like why it's there. So then we had to look at who are the characters who are going to best represent those things in their own ways. And so I think first Colin picked a Knoll because we wanted a non-passing mutant, like somebody who couldn't live in human society without people knowing he was a mutant. Right. And he's also been a character who Colin and I have both associated with a lot since we were young men, and also one that Colin specifically has wanted to write for a very long time. So he really took it as a chance to be like, yes, a Knoll, mine. So he brought in a Knoll. I sort of did the same thing with Prodigy, where that's a character I've always really associated with. I really love this character, and I think that it was really tragic that he literally finally made X-Men and then immediately died. And I was like, that's just such a great way to enter into the post-Krakoan era, to have this character who, his last aspects of it were trauma.
Didn't get that chance.
Yeah. So he's gonna have to approach this kind of academically, because that's the only way that he could approach it, like with any kind of real protection for himself. So that felt really nice. Sophie was a pretty obvious. Cuckoo was a pretty obvious addendum, but then Sophie, being the one who was just resurrected, who's been dead the longest, who has less association with the other cuckoos, felt like a really interesting opportunity to talk about individuality. So I feel like Colin brought that one in, and then I probably brought in Laura, because I knew we really wanted a sort of quote-unquote Batman to Kamala's Superman. We kind of wanted a Daredevil to Kamala's Steve Rogers. I needed that edgy, gritty version of that same idea that could really argue about what it meant to be mutants and what it meant to be a mutant hero in New York. And so once we put that crew together, It was really a matter of then looking at what are the narratives that those characters are going to open up, what are interesting ways that they're going to bounce off each other. And, we had great things where some of those are Academy X, some of those aren't. Some of those have been X-Men, some of them have not been, some of them want to be X-Men, some of them don't. And it created a really nice frame for us to just start discussing all of the various ways that mutantum could be ascribed and associated with and embodied.
I think your book, more than anything else in the line right now, is really providing that connective tissue with the past era. I'm curious about how much you guys are choosing to put in and how much you're holding back from, maybe because you want to still be doing something new at the same time. So where do you draw that line in terms of bringing something in, like somebody dropping a line in Krakoan, or a character like Subunar who appeared in the third issue?
Yeah, well, so I think it's all about moderation, right? I think the big trick here is that this does need to be simultaneously a book for people who loved Krakoa and a book for people who never read Krakoa. And so what we want to do is have enough of it in there that if you're not into Krakoa, but you read a line in Krakoan and you want to know what that says, you might go look up the language and do the language cipher, and maybe you'll discover that you like that.
Right.
And maybe if you like that, you'll go back and you'll check out some of those Krakoan issues, because you'll find that there's a lot more of that kind of stuff there for you, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe you won't. And if you don't, then great. I know people who, I was listening to a podcast that read the book and they were like, well, I have no idea what this person said. And they didn't bother to look up the translation, and they just kind of let it go.
Yeah.
And that's fine too, because it creates that framework where mutants are inherently outsiders to the human experience. Right. So great, it just creates a narrative, separation. In terms of how much we bring in versus how little, I think my thing is I want to make sure that it never feels like we're telling stories about Krakoa.
Okay.
There's no point in telling stories about Krakoa.
Right.
Krakoa is gone.
Right.
The point of now is to tell stories that are flavored by what has happened previously. So the language still exists, the culture still exists, holidays still exist. What is the Hellfire Gala without Krakoa?
Okay.
Keep reading X-Men comics, right? Like, we're not trying to forget that stuff.
Yeah.
We're trying to reincorporate it. And NYX sort of became the line that, like, I know, like, it's sort of how Jed refers to it a lot in the line, which is like, if it's a mutant culture story, it belongs in NYX. That it's like, oh, are we doing something about mutant culture? That's that's NYX's purview. That's not what X-Men is doing. That's not what Uncanny's doing. In fact, Eve's Extraordinary is specifically not doing that. Is trying to build a new mutant, like understanding by these kids who never experienced Krakoa, right? So our book gets to be the other, like the flip side of that, and then gets to talk with Eve a lot. Our books are going to start talking more and more with each other, and you're going to see little bits of crossover as these books start to weave.
Yeah.
But I think if you look at our plots, while they might have Krakoan flavor, like our villains are called the Quiet Council, for instance, right? Our villains, quote unquote, are called the Quiet Council.
Yeah.
Sure. It's Krakoan flavor, and it's inspired by Krakoa. Their plan is very much to effectively create a new Krakoa out of New York. How are they going to do that? What is the objective there? How are they managing that? That's all forward-thinking story. That's story that is going to build new context. And then in Laura, you saw the debut of sort of our second villain, which is Mojo.
Yeah.
Who's wearing a human puppet face and effectively like pretending to be a sort of Fagin-style character in New York who can collect all these gifted youngsters. Well, that's not Krakoa at all, but it needed Krakoa to happen before it could happen.
Yeah.
If Mojo just rolled in and started Professor Xing, normally there'd be a lot of Professor X's to stop him. But now, there are no Professor X's. Professor X is gone. Magneto is effectively gone. He's playing a backseat role in Alaska. Rogue is very much rejecting that position of being the new Professor X, even if that's kind of what she's becoming. Like, the closest thing that anyone has to a professor who's in X studies is David Elaine, right? It's Prodigy, right? And that's what issue 4 is all about. Incidentally, issue 4 is all about this. It's about what do mutants do without leadership? What does it mean that all of our leaders are either murderers, war criminals, or both? Or at best, people who tried to kill every mutant. Like, it's like there's just no, like, mutant leadership is really falling apart. So that really feels like an interesting move. I think, like, it's always about trying. And then obviously you have the Truth Seekers, who in issue 3 we sort of revealed are an evolution of the Purifiers, right? An evolution of this like human first hate group that is pretending to be about facts and ideas and very much inspired by a lot of the ways that right-wing and sort of populist fascist movements organized, by pretending to be intellectual exercises but actually being exercises in hate, right? Well, that's not a Krakoan thing. It's inspired by Krakoa. It's exacerbated by Krakoa the same way that those groups were exacerbated by the Obama presidency, right? But telling stories about them now is not telling stories about Obama, right? We have to tell the next story. I have to be telling a story about Kamala Harris. Like, that's where we are now.
Okay.
So that's, I think, the way that we look at it is the Krakoan is there as a instrument, as an ingredient, as a flavor through which we can tell new forward-facing stories that couldn't have been told before Krakoa.
I'm seeing the influence of, obviously we're spending a lot of the time talking here about sort of the relationship to the previous era, but we're also seeing characters and themes from a wide variety of different X-Men history. You mentioned some of the Academy X stuff, Hellions. You've got a Mojoverse angle to this.
Yep.
How are you sort of, and I also want to add to that list, I was very surprised to see the name drop of Kaiden from the original NYX, which the original NYX is problematic.
Oh, yes.
In multiple ways.
Yes.
And I when the book was announced,
but it's also a book I read every issue of when it was coming out.
Yeah,
when it first dropped and it didn't, and we were less aware of the problems.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it was like my favorite book on the shelf, but I read every issue and I've always loved Kaiden.
Yeah.
I'm a Coachella kid. I go to concerts. I grew up in music circles. I used to be a music journalist. Like, I love a good rave. Like, Kaiden speaks to something very personal in me. So it wasn't a matter of like trying to get at Kaiden right away. But I think now people have seen her on the cover of issue 6. So we're not shying away from the fact that she's, a character.
Okay.
Like, the way I said it on Twitter a couple of days ago is sort of, I think, the way to think about it, which is most issues of the book are called NYX. Issue 6 is called Nyx.
Interesting. All right. Yeah, I'm just noticing this really interesting amalgam of you sort of pulling all of this together. And I want to compliment you because I think it's merging and melding in a very successful way.
Oh, thank you.
So kudos to you for that. What do you see as sort of like the long term of like pulling this world together as a culture in this book?
So I have to be a little cagey because there's some stuff that hasn't been announced yet.
Yeah.
What I can say comfortably now is part of our long game on NYX is building a space where any character from the X-Men universe, not necessarily just young people, not necessarily just our core cast, can come in and get a spotlight. I think one of the things that the X-Men line has missed for a long time for me is that book where my fave, who only got a great run 20 years ago, can get one great story. And I think that almost anthology-style book is something that Colin and I really love to do. We just did it on Outsiders at DC. Very much, Planetary was a big influence on us. Like, we really love these books where you can step in and embrace the idea of, like, single-issue storytelling.
Okay.
So for me, part of NYX is creating that space so that any character, and I'll say, like, issue 9, I bet people could guess for an hour, and I don't think they would guess who the prospective character for issue 9 is. I was even surprised by the prospective character of issue 9. So that's sort of part 1. Part 2 is there is a larger long game in play. NYX is going to spin into something else.
Interesting.
Not in its place, but alongside it.
Okay.
It's another project that Colin and I are working on that I can't talk about yet, but I think when people see it, they'll understand that, like, while NYX has been operating at a small scale, that doesn't mean that its storylines are operating on a small scale.
Okay.
And that actually these things have a lot more ramification outside of that. So we have some ideas there, and we're working with some insane, like all-timer art talent on that thing. So I can't wait for people to finally be able to talk about what that is.
Yeah.
And then the third part of the long game, and this is where I'll be the most cagey, is all in issue 10. Issue 10 fundamentally changes the fabric of the book. Like, there is a thing that happens in 10, which is sort of the end of our second arc, that is going to any story we tell after that.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you if there's going to be an NYX 11. I don't know.
Okay.
I hope there is. I think there will be, but I don't have a renewal yet, so I can't tell you fundamentally, yes, there will be. I would say, please keep buying the book, and then I'll have a better chance at that. Book sells well, so I think it'll be fine, but you never know. If we go to issue 11 will look very different than issue 10. Okay. For reasons that I really can't get into. But I think once people see that, they'll see that we've been doing it since issue 1. Yeah. It's not something we're just going to pull on 10 and be like, gotcha. Like, we're going to be rewarding fans for having read the whole book and seen how the plot has woven in, even if it's been in the background, even if it's been just a small detail. We're doing a lot of, like, subtle work that ideally will pay off. We'll see.
Awesome. Well, the last thing I wanted to ask you, before we started talking, you had multiple people geeking out about your Star Trek work right here. Does the Star Trek, and you're like quoting passage and verse from, I can tell you're a huge fan of that franchise.
Very much.
Does that inform what you're doing in any way with what you're doing in X-Men?
Oh, 100%, but not that the Star Trek comics work is. I mean, I'm sure it has, because I think that our time on Star Trek comics has made Colin and I better writers. I really think you can actually see a marked difference in the quality of our work between before we did year 5 and after we did year 5. I think that book really, it was the only book we did during that sort of 2019 to 2021 era. And I think without it, we would never have done Kang. Without it, we would never have done Captain America. Our Guardians run certainly would be very different. Like, Star Trek changed the way that we wrote just by nature of I think, challenging us to be as smart as Star Trek can be and be as thoughtful and be as empathetic, right? But I think the actual way that Star Trek influences NYX is because I was raised on it. And because what Star Trek does at its said I was quoting chapter and verse, so I'll do that. Roddenberry has a quote when people ask him, like, what was the point of Star Trek? And he has a really, really nice answer, which is to look into the unknown and see ourselves, right? I am, at least in appearance, a cis white dude. I am a person who, when you see me, you don't think I've encountered a lot of struggle or othering, and you're right, by and large. I'm writing a book about people who are othered, right? How do I do that honestly? How do Colin and I do that honestly, and do that in a way that doesn't feel like we're stunting and trying to, like, step into spaces that don't belong to us? Yeah. And I think a big part of how we approach that is the same way that Gene approached everything on Star Trek, which was to say, this isn't about what makes us different. That is there and is important. That's the anti-racist aspect of this, which is we have to recognize the difference so that we can acknowledge that it has become culturally important.
Sure. But
at the same time, it's about us looking at these characters and not looking for the dissimilarities between ourselves and Kamala Khan, but looking for those places where we are the same. Looking for those places where I see my own personal experience in Kamala. Kamala is defined in a lot of ways, and at least half of those are things I can have some relatability with. Not all of it. I've never been Muslim. I've never lived in New Jersey, right? But I've certainly read Marvel Comics my whole life. I've certainly got my moral compass from these characters and experienced what it's like for that moral compass to fall apart. I've discovered that I'm part of communities I didn't think I was a part of and been embraced by those communities. I know what that's like, and I can speak to that directly, right? And so I think what Star Trek has done is it's always opened our minds towards find the story as it relates to you, and then talk from that lived experience, right? It's not stories about ideas, it's stories about people. So make those people work.
Jackson, I want to just thank you. You've taken a lot of time out here at your table, and I wish you all the best. I'm enjoying the book, and I just hope it continues to go well for you.
Yeah, thank you. Me too.
All right. Have a great con. Thank you.
You too. Appreciate you, and I love your show.
Today is October 18th, about 10:21 a.m. at NYCC with Spencer Ackerman. Spencer, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Zach. Thanks for having me.
No, glad to have you on here. So you are a Pulitzer Prize winning national security journalist who is writing Iron Man. Coming out, I think by the time this goes up, either just came out or is coming out this week. What is appealing to you about using comics as the medium for your fiction writing?
So something that you encounter when you start writing fiction when coming from a journalism background is you can employ subtext in a way that, were you to do that in journalism, it would be arguably irresponsible. Because when I write my journalism, I'm writing in as efficient a manner as I can and as direct in a manner I can to convey what I think is important for a public to know. But if I want to interrogate some of the things that I'm writing about, I need to similarly present that on the page in that manner. And that means you also run into difficulties of professional responsibility should you want to sort of arch an eyebrow. Like, it's not a great idea to do that for a reader instead of just directly explaining what is potentially dubious about something or worthy of further investigation or something like that if you're not at a point of readiness for publication. You might simply choose to not do any of that and wait until you do a follow-up story for that. But when you're writing fiction, and especially when writing comics, where you have a visual layer on top of the textual layer, you can have those two things in contrast in a way that is liberating when you're writing about, misery in bulk, exploitation in bulk, and so on. That's not going to be what Iron Man is about. Iron Man is going to be a fun superhero comic. Some of those flavors will have seasoned the broth, perhaps, but it's still going to be a fun superhero comic.
Well, I want to dig into that just a little bit, because when I think back to when I was growing up, Iron Man was a B-list kind of character. Obviously, not the case anymore, and that big spike in popularity came hand in hand with his involvement in movies that open with conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan and the Middle East that you heavily covered. How do you, I guess in your mind, how do you deal with having a deep understanding of those real world events, stuff that you literally wrote the book on, and then intersecting that with the fiction of this character and having to write him as a fun superhero comic?
Well, to answer it just on a level of my experience, it's a whole lot more enjoyable, certainly kind of on the verge of cathartic, to come back to some of those moments from when, I covered conflicts, sometimes up close. With the character, I think it's a question of presenting challenges on the order of just keeping Tony Stark's nose just above the waterline, given both his tremendous resources and also tremendous resourcefulness.
Well, I think it's interesting. Iron Man was a character that Stan Lee claimed in his later years that he wanted to write as an unlikable character that he could make his audience like. And at the time, during the early days, or not early days, but during the Vietnam War, Marvel was very popular on college campuses. So having a character that was an arms dealer, that was involved in all this stuff, was at least something that perceived to be a pretty big challenge to become popular. So I guess, how does that history, coming from, again, that security background, how does that history play into your writing of the character? Because you have been embedded with some of these real world analogs to that character up close.
So what I'll be doing in this series is presenting the institutions that Tony is involved in, the military-industrial complex. I'm trying to figure out how to talk around certain things. We're going to be in those environments. We're going to be not doing always the parts of those institutions that make things explode, but for quiet moments, we will still be in the environments that make those things explode. And we'll see how there are tendencies inside those institutions, in those moments of whether you wouldn't really call it relaxation, but inertia, where it's just sort of doing, the machine is grinding the way it's supposed to be grinding. And we'll see how that has its own tendency to have people involved in the gears of that machinery describe human beings in abstract manners, not as you and I, not as people with agencies and interests and cares and idiosyncrasies and contradictions and so forth, but as data. And that is something that we'll stay with while we're with Tony Stark, our superhero, who we want to root for.
Right.
And we will see what choices he makes, particularly when it is brought to his attention that this machinery chews people up.
Right. No, that's very interesting. I'll tell you, as after reading the first issue, I'm definitely seeing some of the things that you're talking about there. I'm very excited to see how that gets developed further. Now, many folks, at least in the comic sphere, became aware of you from, purely in a comics context, not in your actual real life journalism context, through your appearances on the podcast Cerebro, where you would take nuanced and deep philosophical and policy takes on various X-Men characters. How has that level of deep dive into a fictional character prepared you or informed the way that you're approaching this topic for this subject for a character that, 6 months ago was quote unquote an X-Men character?
I mean, to the point of distraction, I'm built in such a way to go down a rabbit hole, to diagram the dimensions of the whole, to document its changes over time on a granular level. So while Iron Man in this era is not an X-Men book, if you like the approach that I took on Cerebro to include the often deranged moments of that approach, I think you'll like what we're going to do in Iron Man. If you came to Iron Man from the X-Men world, you are my people. I will not forget or abandon you. But I do need to be clear, it by necessity can't be in the X-Men side of Marvel Comics at this moment in publication history.
I love that you understand the specific psychological idiosyncrasies of X-Men fans to address that.
I'm one of you. I am going to make sure that you eat.
Good. Now, last question for you. This is a exciting new project for you. What excites you the most about getting this opportunity?
It's hard to narrow down to just one thing. It's a dream come true to write for Marvel Comics. I learned how to read in large part because of Marvel. To be able to come into this place and be given the vote of confidence that is an ongoing by an Iron Man level character, it's humbling, and I feel the weight of that. And they asked me early on, would you like to just sort of silo the book away and tell a specific story about Iron Man and Iron Man's supporting cast, you can do that. Or you can play in the larger world of what the public. And before my editor Sarah Brunstad, to whom I'm very grateful, finished that sentence, I was like, no. I want to be as integrated into the broader Marvel storytelling project as possible. That to me is the joy of the Marvel universe, that what happens in book X matters in book Y, and the way these different characters are portrayed by the same creative teams, and the way these same characters are portrayed by different creative teams is what floats my boat. And I wanted to get as immersed as possible in the broader Marvel universe. There are stories that are coming, including one that I believe was announced yesterday, that will be a big part of 2025.
Talking about Ryan North's upcoming Emperor Doom series, or I missed the name of it, but
I am certainly very excited for Ryan North's One World Under Doom.
One World Under Doom, thank you.
As it's coming, and I would just say that Iron Man is the kind of character that I think people want to see in multiple contexts on the stands each month. And I wanted that to make sense. I didn't want them to always be wondering, but isn't he off doing this, this, and this in his own book? No, he's playing with the rest of the team. And that's what I think is what excites me the most, that I get the privilege of doing that.
Well, we're looking forward to see that happen. Spencer, thank you so much for your time today.
Hey, thank you so much, Zach.
And we're back. Wow. Adam, that was a great time that was had by all, and definitely wasn't 30 seconds after we cut off.
No, we definitely waited like almost 2 hours to just continue talking.
Oh my gosh, is this thing literally like 2 hours?
This episode is super, super chunky.
It's a chunky. Does it know what it does? Stop getting distracted, Zach. People have waited long enough. Adam, I had such a good time at NYCC with you. Do you want to tell people where they can find you?
Folks can always follow me on socials, Arthur Stacy at Twitter, Adam Reck on Blue Sky and Instagram. Like I said at the top of the show, we had some more NYCC coverage over at Comics XF from me and Dan Grote, and there's additional New York Comic Con interviews on the Comics XF interview podcast that Dan does. So make sure you check that out.
Also, and I don't know what feed it's on yet, but Hoxpox Talks correspondent Rob Secundus does ask people a very interesting question on a Patreon feed for a podcast. And we were still debating as we ended where that would be going.
Well, wherever it ends up,
I was listening.
Yeah, wherever it ends up, I will be on that.
I will be too.
I'm talking mystery podcast.
I'm talking about one of my favorite topics, and it is. I'll give people the treat that they need. It's the three Jokers. We're talking about the three Jokers.
Yeah. So
the clown, the criminal, and the comedian.
We're not talking about that on our show, but when we do have a link for that, we will share it via social. Zach, is there anything that you want to plug?
Oh, I just want to plug our Patreon. It's so great. It allows me and Adam to continue doing the show, to go out to New York Comic Con and have a fun time together and put together these great specials for you. If you want to be like the fine folks over there, you can go to patreon.com/Battle of the Atom, toss in a couple of bucks, $5 if you've got them. And if you toss in $5, you know what? We'll do a whole episode of this podcast where we normally rank X-Men comics, all about a theme built out of the suggestion of your choosing.
Love that.
It's so much fun. It's great, and it allows us to do fun stuff with it. Beyond that, I have nothing to plug. I have this show to plug, and you already know about it because you're here.
Well, Zach, we have conquered New York, so it is time to celebrate the spooky season we teased a Dr. Nemesis episode, which we will get to eventually, but we
didn't realize that when we were going to be in New York City for an entire week, including days before while I was traveling,
Zach was
that we couldn't
exploring the
record.
entire tri-state area, in the days leading up to that. So
that's not an exaggeration.
No, it's not.
We realized that we couldn't record an episode for Halloween, so we're doing double Halloween next, and Dr. Nemesis is happening and will happen at a future date. I promise, because it has a comic that I want to talk about.
Nice.
But double Halloween starts next week. And we're excited for that. Until then, folks, this has been Battle of the Atom. We hope you survived the experience.
Get it!